Okay, hello everybody today, although I doubt anybody's here yet. Today, I tried to do a lesson yesterday about subject, verb, object, and copular verbs, and I tried to do it on the board. But unfortunately, it didn't work. This quite often happens if you're making videos. I've made hundreds now on YouTube, and quite often something will go wrong. Perhaps it's because I'm lacking in computer skills, but or perhaps it's because I lack computer skills. I think that sounds better. But it is a common problem, and so I've decided to just try live videos. It was a live video actually yesterday, but it seems quicker and easier. I'm not going to bother doing the class today because this way, I'm not going to be bothering with the whiteboard today because this way I can actually see your comments. And so if you want to write comments today, today is a good day for comments. And I'm just tired of making the effort to make lessons and then being disappointed. So we're going to discuss subject, verb, object, which really is the basics of grammar, if in particular English grammar. Other languages may not follow that subject, verb, object pattern. In fact, other languages don't necessarily follow that pattern. They have other ways of showing the listener or the speaker which word is the subject and which word is the object. They tend to use endings of the words to show that one word is the doer of the verb and the other word is the word which is having the verb being done to it, if that makes any sense. So you should always remember that English sentences go subject, verb, object. That will make identifying parts of speech much easier. Now, what I mean is, if we take a simple sentence, I've got a kid's book here, and if we take the very first sentence in the book, which is, I saw the Great Pyramid and got thirsty. I hope you can all see that. I saw the Great Pyramid and got thirsty. We simply have, I saw the Great Pyramid. Subject, I. And the subject will always be there. It will never come after the verb. Or okay, it does sometimes in some exceptional circumstances, but most of the time the subject will come before the verb in English. So we've got I saw the Great Pyramid. I is the subject, saw is the verb, and the Great Pyramid is the object of the verb. It is the thing being seen. So that's how most verbs work in English. Now, don't get confused. Don't think for a second that I'm saying the subject must be one word. It doesn't have to be one word. It could be a whole group of words. But what I am saying is it must be a thing. And so there must be a noun there somewhere, or it must be an expanded noun phrase, which is the subject. Because it's a thing which is doing the verb, and it's a thing which is having the verb done to it. And so the object must have a noun in there as well. And so that's something that's really worth remembering. It's something where if you see that if you see that an ing word, like a gerund or a participle, right? If you see it in the subject position or the object position, it's going to be a gerund and not a participle. Only gerunds can function as nouns, and that means that ing words that are in the subject or object position must be gerunds. They can't be participles. Okay? Participles go in other positions where they're describing a noun. They are describing a noun themselves. And so participles are certainly not gerunds, and they function very differently from gerunds, even though they look exactly the same. And that's quite confusing, I think, for a lot of people. But subject, verb, object is not the only form that we have. We also have subject, copular verb, and copular verbs include be, get, seem, look, taste, sound. There are quite a few copular verbs, in fact. But these copular verbs, the thing to remember about them is that they don't have an object. And what that means is you don't have to have a noun after the verb. With other verbs, you really do. You ought to have some kind of noun there in the subject and object position. But with copular verbs, you don't need that. You can say, I am hot. Yeah? You can't say, I see hot. But you can say, I am hot. You can say, I got hot. You can say, it seems hot. So you can have an adjective after a copular verb, and it is describing the subject when you have an adjective after a copular verb. When you say I am hot, hot is describing how I feel. Yeah, hot is describing the noun I, the pronoun I. So hot, it can be used, adjectives can be used and are used very often after copular verbs. If we have another ordinary verb like speak or see, and you want to include some kind of adjective, you can't. You can't say, I speak quick. It would be a mistake. What you mean is, I speak quickly. So it's an adverb that comes after an ordinary verb, because an adverb describes how you're speaking. It describes a verb. So in that particular sentence, I speak quickly, there's just a subject and a verb. There's no object. And that's something else that you must understand. Not all verbs require an object. Many do. And if they require an object, they're called transitive verbs. If they don't require an object, they are intransitive. Now, some can be used transitively or intransitively. Yeah, so you can say, I speak English, in which case you mean you speak the English language, and then speak has an object. The English language is being spoken. But you can just say, I speak quickly, in which case speak doesn't have an object. So quite a few verbs are transitive, quite a few are intransitive. If you want to check, use a dictionary. I'm a big fan of dictionaries. Anybody who doesn't use a dictionary is missing out on a lot of information. So you can always check whether a verb is transitive or intransitive in the dictionary, and that will tell you if you really do need an object or not. So I hope you can see the big difference between copular verbs and main verbs. They are different. Main verbs, you'd need an adverb to describe the verb if it has no object. Copular verbs, you can just use an adjective and it describes the subject. So they really are different. They work in very different ways. Just like other types of verbs, like modal verbs, stative verbs, auxiliary verbs, they're well worth learning about. They will clear up a lot of misunderstanding. If I take some other sentences from this book, I'm hoping to show you that you can basically use this simple information in order to find out what part of speech you can take any sentence and analyze it and find out what is the function of every single word. Is it functioning as an adjective? Is it functioning as an adverb? Is it functioning as a noun? So I want to quickly make it clear that subjects and objects of verbs will have a noun in them, certainly, somewhere. Adjectives modify nouns. Now, what do I mean by modify? I just mean describe. A black car. Black is describing the car. Adverbs modify everything else, okay? Let's just come back to he speaks quickly, and that means that quickly is modifying speak. It's modifying a verb, so it must be an adverb. And by the way, a lot of adverbs end in ly, so that should be a signal that it might be an adverb. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an adverb. Lovely is an adjective, friendly is an adjective, so there are adjectives that end in ly, so be careful. But most words that end in ly are adverbs. So if adjectives modify nouns, adverbs modify everything else, absolutely everything else. Adverbs can modify adjectives, for example, incredibly hot. Adverbs can modify adverbs, for example, incredibly often. Adverbs can modify verbs. He speaks quickly, or any other kind of, she plays the piano beautifully. Beautifully modifies how she plays the piano, right? So beautifully modifies play, it's an adverb. So they can modify adjectives, they can modify other adverbs, they can modify verbs, and then they can also modify whole clauses. And this is when very often when you're giving a comment on the sentence, like fortunately, comma, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, comma, blah, 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 blah. Now, in this situation, fortunately and unfortunately are sentence adverbs, which just means that they modify the whole sentence. They modify the whole clause. Okay, so that's another way that adverbs can function. They can modify adjectives, adverbs, verbs, and whole clauses. That's four 4 different things they can modify. So they're the most complex part of speech, without doubt, and they're the hardest, I think, for a lot of people to identify when they're doing a part, when they're taking a book like this and just analysing it. So we've got adjectives which modify nouns. We've got adverbs which modify everything else. We've got verbs which are in every sentence. You know, you've got to understand that there is a verb in every sentence, certainly. And in an ordinary sentence, they go between the subject and the object. You should also remember that we have something called passive in English. And passive is where you take an active sentence like I kicked the ball, and you put the ball first and you say the ball was kicked. Now you should notice that passive sentences very often don't have an object. They just have subject, was kicked, and then no object. We don't tell anybody by whom the ball was kicked. We don't say by whom. So we just say the ball was kicked. Yeah, and it misses that. It's something to remember, to see that the object might be missing sometimes. It's not just about transitive, intransitive verbs. It could also be the case that it's a verb being used in the passive. Okay? It's something else to remember. There are a lot of different things to remember here when we're doing parts of speech. So let me just take a sentence from here. I'm gonna make it fair and just take it like that. I haven't prepared this, and I like to do these things without preparation, because it will show you that it is possible, without using a dictionary, to look at a sentence and identify the functions of the parts of speech. So this was the one which I came to completely by accident. It's chapter 10, and it says, the driver laughed till tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Let's go through this sentence. The is down in the dictionaries as a determiner. That's not really very helpful. Determiners just tell you which one. That's the definition of a determiner. They tell you which one. So numbers are included as determiners. Pronouns are included as determiners. All sorts of different words are included as determiners. But all I'd like you to know is the definite article. It's not the indefinite article, a or an. And if you understand in terms of articles, it's perhaps the best way to understand it. But I'm not going to focus on articles today. Just take it for granted that the is an article. It's the definite article. It's also called a determiner. And that's why you see that word in the dictionary. Next word, driver. Now, my brain is already telling me that this is probably the subject. Yeah, it's probably the agent of the action. It's probably the person who is performing the verb. So let's go further and see. The driver laughed. I'm very fortunate because I'm correct. Yeah, this has started with the subject, the driver, and all subjects are nouns. Yeah, there must be a noun there somewhere, and driver is a person. A person is always going to be a noun. Yeah, a doctor, a driver, an engineer, they're all nouns. So driver's a noun, and it's the subject of the verb laughed. Laughed must be a verb. How do I know it's a verb? I can do tests on it. I can say, can I use laugh in different tenses? I laugh, she laughs, I am laughing, she is laughing, she was laughing, she can laugh, she would like to laugh. Yes, it's a verb. It functions as a verb in all of those sentences. And in this sentence, it's got an ed on the end because that's the past tense form of laughed. So it's saying that the driver did this in the past. He laughed in the past. Okay, so laugh is clearly a verb. We've got the subject, the driver. We've got laughed, the verb. Then we've got until. He laughed until tears formed in his eyes. So here we don't really have anything which is which the verb laughed is being done to. I hope you can see that there's no object of the verb laughed. We're just given an adverbial phrase describing how the laughter took place. And lots of things can be adverbial phrases. Prepositional phrases are adverbial phrases in the sense that they're telling you how the verb is done. in answer to the question that I've just been asked, yes, watch the video on sentence adverbs and it explains this. I've just done a video on sentence adverbs. Watch that video and it goes into detail on sentence adverbs, which come at the end after a comma or at the beginning after a comma. So you really want to watch that video. But at the moment, I'm just doing this sentence and I want to make it as clear as possible. So, till tears formed in the corner of his eyes is actually a whole adverbial phrase. Yeah, we've got a whole adverbial phrase there, until tears formed in the corners of his eyes. And until are very close. Yeah, they're pretty much the same thing. It's a till is a less formal way of saying until. So what kind of word is until? Well, this is quite a difficult one. We've said we've got a subject and a verb. We can't see an object anywhere, anything which is having the laughter done to it. Now, this is because when you laugh, if you laugh at an object, laugh always is used with the preposition at. And that's something that you really ought to understand as well. English verbs very often have a preposition, and they must have a preposition if they're going to have an object. For example, wait. You can't say, I'm waiting the bus. A lot of students do, but it's definitely wrong. So you have to say, I am waiting for a bus. Yeah, you have to put that preposition in there to give the object of the verb wait. And I mean, really, it's the object of the preposition for. But yeah, it's the thing which you are waiting for. Yeah, you are waiting for a bus. And the same with laugh. You only laugh at someone. You don't laugh someone. You've got to laugh at someone. I can't see an at here, so I know there's no object of the she laughed. We just have till or until tears formed in the corners of her eyes. Now, I hope you can see here that this is a new clause. We've got the first clause, the driver laughed. And then we've got the second subordinate clause, which is describing the main clause. It's an adverbial phrase because it's describing how she laughed. And the subordinate clause is until tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Now here, until is therefore a conjunction. It must be a conjunction. How do I know? Because it's joining a main clause with a subordinate clause. The subordinate clause is until tears formed in the corners of his eyes. We can't just say on its own, until tears formed in the corners of his eyes, full stop. That would be a mistake because it's a subordinate clause. And so until is definitely a subordinating conjunction. I can tell you now that it's definitely a subordinating conjunction. How do I know that? Because it starts a subordinate clause. That's why we call it a subordinating conjunction. If it were a coordinating conjunction, if you need more information about subordinate clauses, watch the video on subordinate clauses. But we know it's not a coordinating conjunction because coordinating conjunctions join main clauses. They don't join subordinate clauses. They join two main clauses. So here I know that until is a subordinating conjunction. It's starting a subordinate clause. That much is really clear to me. It's absolutely crystal clear to me. So we know that she is the subject of the verb laughed. We've got subject and then verb, which are they're a main clause here because we can say she laughed, full stop. It doesn't require an object. It's an intransitive verb. And if it does have an object, it will have the preposition at. I guarantee it. You can't laugh someone, you laugh at someone, or you laugh at a joke. So you can see that the object requires a preposition there with the verb laugh. But without the preposition, it's intransitive. We can say she laughed. So let's look more closely now at the subordinate clause, which can also be broken up into subject, verb, object. Yeah? Although, let's have a look. Tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Yeah, we do have objects here, but we have objects of the prepositions. So the verb here needs a preposition. Quite often, verbs like laugh, they need a preposition if you're going to have an object. Quite a lot of verbs do need a preposition. Let's look at this subordinate clause. Until, subordinating conjunction, tears must be the subject. It's a noun, it's got a verb right after it, formed, so it must be the subject. Tears is the subject of the verb. Formed, tears are what formed. In the corners. So in is a preposition. It's telling us where the tears formed. You could see the whole prepositional phrase as an adverbial phrase. It is. Prepositional phrases are adverbial phrases. They add information about how the verb was done. So how did the tears formed, or where did the tears form? They formed in the corners. Now I know corners must be a noun. And it's not just because it's plural, although that's a great test for a noun. If you can make a word plural, it means it's a noun, yeah? One ruler, two rulers. It must be a noun, it must be a thing. And the same logic with corner. One corner, two corners, four corners in this, on a square, yeah, for example. So if you see that a word can be made plural, that means it's a noun. But a second thing to remember is the object of a preposition must be a noun. You try to think of the object of a preposition when it's not a noun, and it's just not possible. You can't say in the hot or out of the, I was going to say out of the blue there, but that is a good expression. But out of the cold. Well, I suppose cold meaning outside, you might say. And cold can be a noun, so that's a bad example. Bad example, but let's take a really obvious, like out of, really obvious adjective, out of small. It doesn't make any sense. Out of a small box makes sense then, because you've got an object of the preposition, the box. It's a noun. So after prepositions, you're going to have nouns, yeah? That's why you've got in, the is another clue that you're dealing with a noun, because the is used before nouns, just like a is used before nouns. There might be an adjective in between the and the noun, or the and the noun, so don't think that it's definitely a noun. But here we've just got the corners. We haven't got the dark corners or the big corners or the I don't know, the crooked corners or whatever. We've just got the corners. Corners must be a noun. And then after corners we've got another preposition, of. Now I can see it's a preposition because again it's followed by a noun, eyes. Okay, we have another word in between there. We have a possessive pronoun, his, but it must be a preposition because it's got an object which is a noun, and that means it must be a preposition. Okay, and very often we'll have a prepositional phrase like in the corners of his eyes, and it's describing where the tears formed. So it is an adverbial phrase. You can see it all as an adverb. It's functioning altogether like an adverb. That's how it's functioning. It's functioning as an adverb, not like an adverb. It's functioning as an adverb. I think we say function as. I think as is the preposition of to function. So yeah, it's well worth remembering that prepositional phrases function like adverbs. That will help you as well. But all we have here is main clause, the driver laughed, subordinate clause, until tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Now I hope that makes at least that sentence a little bit clearer, and I hope that clears up some things. I'd quite like to show you now a sentence where we don't have subject, verb, object, but where we have subject, verb, complement, because they are a little bit different. So if we take a sentence such as, I didn't think she was right. Yeah, if we take that, I didn't think she was right. If you want to know the difference between like and as, try my video on the difference between like and as. Always search YouTube. It's a big place, and if you just ask me, then I always feel like I've already told you the difference, and so please check that video. It's not a great video actually, my one on the difference between like and as, but the basic way of understanding it is like is used informally as a conjunction, but it shouldn't be. In formal academic speech, you should only use as before the clause. You should use like before a noun, because like is a preposition. Okay, but please watch the video for more information. So I didn't think she was right. We've got I didn't think, yeah, that. I know that is isn't there, but you could include it. I didn't think that she was right. So we've got I, the subject of the verb, right? I is always the subject of the verb. I is a pronoun because subjects must be nouns. I've already explained this. Didn't think. Didn't think is actually two verbs. If you think about it, you know, did is a verb, to do. I do, I am doing, I have done, I have been doing, I didn't do something. So didn't is just the verb do. but it's not the main verb in this sentence. It's an auxiliary verb. And when you see two verbs together, I want you to immediately think auxiliary verb or modal verb. And modal verb is a type of auxiliary verb anyway. So it's got to be an auxiliary verb if there are a few verbs together. That's not absolutely true, but it depends how you define verb, because if you've got a gerund after a verb, technically that's not a verb, although it looks like one. So if you have I didn't think, didn't is an auxiliary verb. It's called an auxiliary verb because it's just helping to make the sentence negative, and that's why it's an auxiliary verb. Auxiliary verbs make negatives, they make different tenses. I have been living here for 3 years. Have been are auxiliary verbs. Living is the main verb. And here, I didn't think that she was right. I didn't think she was right. Didn't is just modifying think. It's just an auxiliary verb which is making the think negative. But think is the main verb. So I is the subject of the main verb think. Think is the main verb. Didn't is just an auxiliary verb. And then we have the object of think, which is a that clause. Although it's got no that in it. Okay, it's got no that in it. We can just miss out the that because we've got a whole clause here. So I didn't think she was right. I didn't think that she was right. That she was right is the object of think. It's what wasn't thought. Yeah, I didn't think that she was right. She was right wasn't thought by me. And she was right. Again, we can see this as subject and verb, but here it's not subject, verb, object. It's subject, verb, complement. We've got she, the subject, was, which is to be, it's the past tense of to be, and then we have right, which is actually an adjective describing she. If she's right, then she's right. Yeah, she's the right. That she's the right person. That she's correct about something. I didn't think she was correct. Yeah, it's just like saying that. I didn't think she was right. So here we're describing the person as right, and it's functioning as an adjective. It can also, right can also function as an adverb. For example, I am right out of ideas, or something like that, or he was standing right behind her. Then it's actually modifying standing. So it doesn't have to be an adjective, and that's another thing to be aware about with parts of speech. The same word as can be a preposition, it can be a conjunction. Pretty sure it can be an adverb as well, but I'd have to check that. They can have several different parts of speech, several different functions. A play is a noun, to play is a verb. So a lot of words are like that, and that's where the dictionary really comes in handy, because when you read the dictionary, you see loads of examples of the same word being used as an adjective, and then the same word being used as an adverb. And so please use a dictionary. It really will help your understanding of grammar. So now is a good time to ask any questions, because I'm kind of done with subject, verb, object. I hope I haven't confused anyone a great deal more. Do you have any questions? Put them now, as opposed to earlier when I'm speaking. I can't concentrate on what you're asking then. So now is the time. I'll give you another 10 seconds or 20 seconds, and then I'm disappearing. I'm going to do gerunds and participles, which is connected to this. So what does it, please what? You need to be more specific. Okay, no more questions? Well, thanks everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like the video, please give it a like, and please subscribe for more classes. I'm going to probably do a lot more I want to know what is no big deal. Well, I mean, you can always use a dictionary there. Let's see if it comes up. It's very idiomatic English, a big deal. If something is no big deal, it means it's not important. Okay? If something is no big deal, it means it's not important, it's trivial, it's petty, it's unimportant. But, I mean, please do use dictionaries, because when people don't use dictionaries, they learn much slower. How to know when to use a and the. Please watch my videos. I've got 17 videos on articles. 17. Each one at least 10 minutes long. So that's more than an hour of article fun just waiting for you. If you just type it into the YouTube search bar, articles, Mr. Skype Lessons, you'll find it. I'm fine. I'm doing fine today. It's quite overcast here in England. It's quite cloudy. Not a particularly nice day, but still, I'm in a good mood. Okay, well, you need to practice using the dictionary. You really do. I mean, when I was learning foreign languages at school, we were all told that we have to use dictionaries. Didn't really understand that one, but yeah, really, I mean, if you're not using a dictionary, you're missing out on a lot of really important information. It shouldn't be hard to use a dictionary. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. Um, Type the word into the search bar, find the word, look at what part of speech it's being used as. Yes, click on more example sentences so that you can have lots. It's all one click away, all this information. Well, I use several. I use Oxford, I use Cambridge, I use Merriam-Webster, I use Macmillan sometimes. I use several because sometimes a dictionary doesn't have a word, but another dictionary does have it. So use lots. Modal verbs, you need to ask a question about them. Can't just say modal verbs, question mark. I don't understand the question. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I'll leave it for today. And as I say, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all soon.